Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Slanted Attic Experience, episode number 23. Today's guest is Dylan, a dynamic and driven individual who's blending the worlds of technology, business, and personal growth. Dylan is on track to wrap up his computer science degree next year and already has his sights set on an MBA to sharpen his business expertise. He's passionate about combining his technical skills with business strategy, with aspirations of breaking into consulting or product management. Beyond academics, Dylan lives and breathes health and wellness. He's big on fitness, nutrition, and staying active. He's also a dedicated football fan, cheering on the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Detroit Lions every single season. When he's not deep in his studies or on the field as a fan, you might find him on the golf course, playing chess, or getting hooked on the latest true crime podcast. And if that weren't enough, Dylan is also a passionate wildlife photographer, constantly building his portfolio and dreaming of globe-trotting adventures to capture the world's most stunning natural moments. Today, we'll dive into Dylan's journey, balancing tech, business, and wellness while exploring the hobbies, goals, and experiences that make him tick. Get ready for a fun and insightful conversation as we bring Dylan on to the Slanted Attic Experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Slanted Attic Experience. Today, we have a reoccurring guest who needs no reintroduction. For those of you that have been watching my YouTube channel for approximately 10 to 15 years, you already know this guy. But for the rest of you that don't and you haven't listened to his first episode, I'd like to reintroduce Dylan. Today, we're going to get into a bunch of exciting topics, but the first, I think we're going to touch on a little bit and discuss Dylan's degree that he's currently going for right now, because that it seems to be a huge market in today's society with machine learning, AGI. There's all kinds of interesting stuff going on. So why don't you kind of get us started in how you chose that career path and degree of study, that field, and what made you interested in it?
Yeah, man. So, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me back. This is the best place to be, um, and
That's right.
I appreciate you having me.
Of course.
So I am currently pursuing a computer science degree. I go to the University of Alabama. I'll be entering my junior year here in the fall. And so what really got me started with, kind of programming and things like that was just the love of the problem solving. I've just
Mm,
always, I guess my brain has always kind of worked in, automation and, the most efficient possible solutions to problems. Um, I remember being a kid and I was, like 12 or 13, and that's kind of the age where your dad, starts to make you, cut the grass a little bit.
yeah.
Um, and I remember the very first time he ever showed me how to cut the grass. I mean, I had no idea how to do it. He kind of took me along his route. I mean, he had a certain route that he had for our grass.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have a ton of yard space, but I remember he had this route that was, had a ton of turns in it, right? So he wasn't finding the longest line that you could find.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember thinking, and I said to him, I was like, well, the most inefficient part of mowing is the turn, right? Because that's, technically that's when you're cutting the least amount of grass is when you're having to turn.
Yep.
So I was like, if there was a way we could, draw out our lawn and kind of find the longest lines, technically that would be more efficient. And so I've just always kind of had a brain like that, and not, not to say that in like a nerd way, but I've just always kind of had a brain for that. And so, um, I had a buddy in middle school that was a little bit into programming, and we'd always talk about, you know, thought we were so advanced at that age, even though we basically just knew the basics.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I was always just obsessed with that. I also loved the creativity aspect of it. I thought it was so cool that there are no, I guess, rules. I mean, you can kind of just create whatever you want. Just any kind of crazy idea you have, you could just create. Like I always thought that was so cool. Kind of like an artist or, somebody that a contractor, things like that. Just kind of you can just make what you want. And
Sure.
I would say my problem solving combined with my creativity kind of led me in that direction, and I'm very happy it did.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's huge, in terms of like self realization and understanding your own mind and body to the fact that you understand that's something you're passionate about. And that's huge. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that people should really look for in terms of determining a field of study or a career path. Find something that you're good at. You're going to
Yeah.
enjoy doing that a whole lot more than something that you might find trouble in adapting to learning new material for that specific field. But yeah, man, that's awesome. Another question for you. I don't know exactly how that field of study is broken up into specific tracks or degrees. What are your options there? Does it land more on? I don't know. I guess that's something I really don't know a whole lot about in terms of like fields of study and like paths and tracks you can take. Because, for instance, when I studied building construction at Virginia Tech, my degree was in sustainable construction, and there was also building information modeling, which was, you know, BIM modeling. For those of you out there that are in the construction field, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's basically 3D modeling of buildings and architecture, so people can kind of conceptualize, what's going into a project. And I think there was one more track, but I chose a sustainability route. I thought that was, incredibly interesting to study renewable energy and other sources of passive energy accrual in off-grid housing. But can you kind of explain that to me a little bit, because I know most college studies have direct tracks that you can kind of walk through to get
Yeah.
opportunities in different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the, kind of most important things about being a computer science major is being extremely humble because you don't know everything and you don't even know close to the surface of everything. Um, one of the things I think is really cool about having a computer science degree is that you can graduate with that degree and you still don't even know the tip of the iceberg. So it kind of makes you a lifelong learner, right? You get to the job and you kind of learn a lot of the specifics of what you need. But I can talk a little bit about kind of the different pathways and things like that. So one of the big things, and this is kind of, I guess, what a lot of, you know, the average person would think computer science is, but that would be more of computer engineering, right? So that would
Hmm.
be a lot of hardware and electrical engineering work, right? Kind of like when your, grandma asks you to change the input on the TV, they kind of think
Yeah.
you're, some sort of expert on all technology. So computer engineering is something that you can go down. That's a lot of they call them low level languages.
Okay.
Those are the languages that like the computer is built on, like the computer can understand. Think binary, right? Binary is very low level, right? Just zeros and ones. Um, and the computer, the high level languages, will break a high level language down into a low level language that the computer can understand. But with computer engineering, with you're working a lot closer to the actual computer itself, right?
Hmm.
You're coding more of what the computer can actually understand. So you're making a lot of hardware, a lot of digital things. Um, and then there's also just your technical software engineering route, right? So that's a lot
Hmm.
of just pure coding, right? Those are the guys that go into the office and they have a desk in the back and they just code all day, right? They code and they have meetings and they work in a team and they implement new features and things like that. And that may be on a website, right? That may be something that you can see. They may be working on the back end, right? So you can also specialize in front end or back end, right?
Hmm.
So, for example, like Discord right now, that's what we at the Slanted Attic Experience record on.
Yep.
But there's the front end, right? So there's the buttons that you can see, there's the little icons, there's the colors that pop up, right? And those are all very very important. But there's also the back end guys, the guys that you could spend a whole day at work and nobody could technically see it. Um,
Sure.
so that's the software engineering route. There's also a whole bunch of stuff. There's cloud stuff, right? There's working for
Hmm.
you can work for any of the consulting companies, which is the route I would like to go into. But you can, do all the cloud work, do all the data computing. Data science is another big one. Machine learning, like you mentioned before, and then obviously now, recently we have AI. which I'll be modest and say I really don't know much about when it comes to the actual coding of it.
Sure.
But that's always a route that you can go into.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Maybe after the podcast or another time, I'll have to connect you with my buddy, but he sells software for Zscaler out of Austin. So he's a part of one of those big cloud infrastructure
Yeah,
companies.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
Some
that,
other
and
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
Amazon Web
Yep.
Services and Oracle, and yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll hook you up with him. He's a good dude. Played
Yeah,
baseball with him for years. Solid guy. I actually called him after I had gotten laid off about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, when I was looking at changing my career paths. He was super awesome, understanding, talked me through a bunch of stuff, which was neat. So I'm sure he would do the same for you. But
yeah,
anyways, I kind of
awesome.
wanted to ask you a conceptual question. I guess it's not really that conceptual as it has to live somewhere, but I was reading an article, or maybe it was like a Reddit post, a thread on cloud storage. And if I understand correctly, these are huge data centers in the middle of nowhere that your information just goes to the cloud and that's where it's stored. People think, it just goes into nowhere and then it's just stored there. Do you know enough to speak on like how the cloud system works? Because, I feel like I'm a relatively up to date dude and I don't really understand that whole infrastructure piece.
Not really, man. And I'll tell you what, the world of computer science is so dense that
Yeah.
even even somebody who's, in the 90th, 95th percentile in terms of the education on the subject, it's tough, dude. It really is tough. No, I would say I know about as much as you on the topic.
Yeah, man, it's like so many industries and areas are so niche and specialized
Yes,
now that like
exactly.
extremely smart people and productive and intuitive and creative, kind of all those details that you were describing earlier, it's really intricate knowledge. I mean, it's tough for the general
Oh yeah.
public to understand like layman's terms
Yes.
of something like that. So I find all that stuff interesting. I consider myself, up to date enough to understand what these people are talking about, but obviously I'd leave it to the experts
Yeah.
time and time again.
And that's the thing, if we had a class in school, as part of our degree path
Mm,
for everything that you could do, you would be in school for the rest of your life. It's just,
yeah.
and part of that's cool, because you kind of get exposed to, every different kind of career path you go into. Um, and then it's just kind of based on, you get hired based on your talent, right? You basically just get hired based on how quickly can you absorb knowledge,
Yep.
because they know that you'll just learn whatever you need to learn once you get there, right?
Yep.
But that is kind of disheartening, knowing the fact that you can't really, you can graduate with your degree and then kind of look back on it and be like, what did I just learn?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's how the standardized American education system fails us all, especially in K through 12. I feel like they weren't prepping us at all for the real world or even
Yep,
um, how to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. I feel like
yep,
I was like stranded in the middle of the ocean with like enough food to last me 30 days and a life raft. You know what I mean?
yep,
Like,
yep,
I had really no idea where I wanted to go. All my family, friends, guidance counselor, they were pushing me towards engineering, which, you know, great field, don't get me wrong, but I never felt like that was somewhere where I needed to be. And, just being lost in that circumstance, I mean, I'm glad I found a good field for me. That doesn't mean I won't branch out, in the future. And I think I'd like to get to more corporate business type of stuff. Although I did work for a super huge company, didn't really enjoy that. That's a conversation for another time. But I feel like there's just not enough information resources out there for kids, 13 through 18, especially if they don't want to go to college. I mean, there are so
yes.
many respectable trades and career paths where you don't have to go to school. And in the construction field, I see that every day. I mean, these guys don't have enough workforce to drive what they need. They're constantly being overworked, but the guys make bank. I mean,
Oh
some of
yeah.
the electricians and specialty like carpenters, skill guys, I mean, they make 60, 70, $80 an hour. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
and I just wish our system was more streamlined to help these people, figure out what they really want to do. And I feel like I was affected by that. So, I have a strong passion towards those type of things. But you know, the underlying issue is we'd have to see a systematic change, and huge countries don't like stuff like that. So they'd have to pump billions and billions of dollars into the education system to set up a whole type of reform, which I don't necessarily think is entirely plausible. Are there ways that they can improve upon what they do? I think absolutely. So it's like a what's the word I'm looking for? There's positives and negatives to it all, but I don't know, man.
Y-
I'm glad you're
Yeah,
doing well. You sound like you're enjoying it, so love to hear
yeah,
that.
I'm definitely enjoying it. One of my favorite things about it is just, and I'm glad that you brought up the skill aspect of it because I think too many people go to college with, kind of their degree so focused in their head, right? Like, say,
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of an example, say your major is econ, right, economics, right, like so many people have that word focused in their head, right, like I'm going to go to school and learn econ, right? Well, what's the skill that you're learning, right? Is it ultra reading comprehension, because that's a skill, right? But I don't think that enough people are focused on that. I think so many people just kind of get their major stuck in their head, and the next thing you know, 4 years later they graduate and they you know know all these terms and whatever, but they didn't actually acquire a skill. um, and one of the benefits of having a computer science degree or an accounting degree, for example, or a nursing degree, is that you're already given the skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't really have to work extra hard to get the skill. Not that they're not hard majors, but the skill is already given to you, right? Like that's kind of part of the curriculum, is to teach you that skill. For other degrees, I think you need to work a little bit harder, right? To
Sure.
figure out kind of your skill, right? I mean, if you go to law school, the those guys' reading comprehension is just off the chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are so good at reading and processing information and working efficiently, and that's a skill. And there's so many people that I run into and say, yeah, I'm a finance major, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, so what part of it are you actually good at, right? And that's something that I think a lot of people need to kind of sit back, especially our college age audience, sit back and think, I don't need to be defined by my finance degree. I need to be defined by is it your analytical thinking? Is it
Mm-hmm.
your ability to quickly understand charts? Is it your ability to process information quickly? Or is it just your ability to just have really good common sense about the qualitative aspects of a company, right? Like, what is your skill that you're working on? And once you can figure out that actual skill that you have, I think it's so much easier to figure out where you want to go after that.
No, I'm totally with you. And part of my degree and career path, I think I've learned more outside of school than I ever did in school. Not to say that it wasn't important. I had a conversation about this today at work, and I think I really matured, grew as a person, learned how to build
Hmm.
meaningful relationships, things like that in my personal life that I don't believe I would have done outside of a college like experience.
Yeah.
But that being said, like I've learned more in my 3 years in the workforce. But my skill, throughout all of that, which led to the creation of this podcast, is building relationships, learning how to communicate
Yes.
effectively with people,
Yes.
and that may not necessarily be my first and foremost skill on my SWOT analysis, right, or my strength.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's something I've really worked on, and I feel like I've gotten a lot better. Not only not necessarily in public speaking, but speaking in front of an audience.
Yes.
I feel like my thoughts have gotten much more well thought out. Speaking clearly, I've practiced this a lot. So that's one thing, I don't necessarily love to pat myself on the back, but for that one, I will, because I feel like, through the last 20, 30 episodes of this podcast, I have gotten significantly better. That
Yeah.
being said, you brought up the what is it like efficient reading analysis of
Yes.
lawyers.
Yes.
So I had one of my girlfriend's childhood friends on the podcast. She went to Harvard Law. She currently works for a law firm in DC. She reads like 100 books a year. I mean,
Jeez. Yeah. Yeah.
her reading comprehension quite literally must be off the charts. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
the conversation we had was phenomenal. I mean,
Yes.
hopefully she's listening to this and gets the shout out. But yeah, for those of you that have not heard Courtney's episode, please go back and give it a listen. It's a great one. We go into all kinds of fun stuff. But anyway, just wanted to kind of point that out a little bit. But yeah, you're right. It's all about building skills and learning to understand what you're good at. I mean, somebody that doesn't understand their strengths, weaknesses, what is it, opportunities and threats,
And
SWOT
threats. Yeah.
analysis, as trivial as it may be or sound, I mean, I think that's kind of a pretty good analysis of how
I think so
people
too. Yeah.
should create and dive into their career paths.
Yeah.
You got going on the financial markets a little bit, so I kind of wanted to transition into that because I bought a share of a company today that manufactures one of the largest GLS drugs in America. I'm pretty sure everybody can guess where we're going right now, and that's Ozempic. Novo Nordisk is the company that produces this drug. They are not the only ones. I'm not sure how many other companies are also working on a GLS weight loss drug. I know Pfizer's putting out something that's in form of the pill. Ozempic is an injectable. But one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up was I was doing some light reading today, just looking into some financials behind this company and what it costs to produce a 1 month supply of Ozempic, which is between 89 cents and $4.73 for this company to manufacture this drug. How much do we think it's selling for on the open market? I'll answer that.
I believe it was like what's $800 a shot.
It's a thousand bucks per month.
Wow.
So, so you bet your ass I invested in this company. Now, do I necessarily agree with um, what is it? Quick fix drugs, I think is a good way to put it. I think the human reward system is a very real thing, and people look to the easiest path or the least, what is it? The least path of resistance,
Yeah.
right? These people want easy ways to lose weight, keep it off. Now, that being said, I have read some interesting things on Reddit of people arguing back and forth. By the way, little quick shout out to Reddit. I know they IPO'd last year. But I think in terms of social media, I'm against most of it. I do still consume it. Reddit is by far my favorite.
Absolutely.
I think that's because the best comments get voted to the top by the collective community of whatever subreddit
Yes.
you're in, and I think
Yes.
that generates good information all around. Usually, obviously, there's still trolls and people spreading misinformation. Top comments, karma bots, all that fun stuff. Those of you who do use Reddit, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, they were talking about possible effects for people with ADHD and neurochemical disorders. And I thought that could be something that would be interesting to have, what is it, human randomized controlled trials. Look into that. That's something I've always been passionate about, interested in. I think we don't do enough on important drugs. I think we should test the episode that's releasing on Monday. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I don't know how. The episode that's releasing on Monday, I have my buddy Jeremy, who I studied building construction in school with, and he's currently running for a seat on the Council of Portland District 9, I would like to say. Excuse me if I'm getting that wrong. But, anyways, we were talking about, I believe it was legislation 110, where they decriminalized all forms of drugs in Oregon. And
Yes.
while I think it was rather destructive to the close environment, and you guys, I don't want to spread any misinformation, say anything out my ass. So if you do want more information on this, please check out that episode. It should be number 14. Releases on July 15th, I want to say. But the immediate impact, I think, was kind of poor, but it allowed for medicinal companies to start producing trials on specific drugs, which I think is the right direction. Um, I think there are medical benefits to some of these psychoactive drugs, namely probably cannabis and psilocybin mushrooms. Not sure about heroin. I don't know if that can ever be good for anybody, but you know,
Beneficial. Yeah.
yeah, right. But some things are better than others. I mean,
Yep.
for instance, one of the episodes I was listening to on Joe Rogan, it was with the Enhanced Games creators, and they brought up a graph by oh, I'd have to do a little bit more research into this to find out what it was, but it was, or by who it was by, the graph. But this one guy did a ton of research um, on the 50 most popular drugs on the planet and basically ranked them from most harmful to least harmful based on quantity of addiction,
Yeah.
deaths, likelihood of people to go out and have psychotic breaks or manic episodes or like do crazy shit,
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
way down to the effects it has on the body. And they were saying the number one drug that is the most harmful to the human body, I'm sure you can guess this,
It's alcohol.
is alcohol.
Yep.
Number two is heroin.
Yep. Which is funny, obviously, because alcohol is legal.
Yeah.
Just kind of goes to show you who makes the decisions and who enjoys the drug.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we kind of went into this a little more in depth in Jeremy's podcast as well. But a popular conspiracy theory, I'm air quoting over here. I know you guys we don't have cameras for this episode, but air quoting a, what is it, class warfare, ability for the rent seeking elite to suppress the population, basically. A lot of what happened in 1984 and the use of alcohol um, keeps people in check in a lot of ways. It keeps people in hospitals,
Yep.
keeps people back at the stores consuming their product. You know, it's a gateway to other drugs, probably namely tobacco. I mean, damn, having 6 beers and a cigar is kind of gas, I got to tell you. But I mean, it's all a system created to keep us reliant on
Yep.
the system, I guess. And it
It's not
doesn't
just a
far
system
out
created,
there.
it's a system, sorry to interrupt you, but it's a system that's
No,
been
no, no.
forming for hundreds of years.
Yes.
And that's really interesting that you said the ranking, because that's exactly where my mind went to. I was wondering, because you said that in Oregon they were able to actually start doing some trials on these drugs, because before you couldn't do trials on these drugs. So that's actually interesting. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, it's because of the whole schedulization process, and that's kind of one of the main leading issues with cannabis being not descheduled but rescheduled into Schedule One. There'd be a whole medium of issues there because Schedule One drugs can only be sold over the counter legally at pharmacies with a prescription.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
would destroy the current market of 28 states, 25 states, 24 states that have recreational cannabis, and
Yeah.
38 states that have medicinally available cannabis. I mean, you're destroying an entire market at that point. I know that I think it was the House just shot it down last week. So, I
Yep.
mean, that's
Saw
not
that.
even a discussion anymore. But based on the schedule, like how the drugs are scheduled, determines their availability, how they can be obtained through prescription or other mediums, um you know the cost, probably. I mean, cocaine Schedule 2, anabolic steroids are Schedule 3. So just to put that into
Gotcha.
perspective, those are some drugs that are on the different levels of the scheduling process that cannabis could be compared to. I don't know what psilocybin mushrooms are. I want to say they're Schedule 3.
Yeah, and it was really nice whenever you said before the episode, we were talking about Ozempic, and you said something about real science.
Yeah,
Um, and I was just, whenever you said that, I was thinking like, what even is real science, right? Like, what is
real.
that? What does that mean, right? Like, what does that mean, right? Like, are we doing 10-year trials, right? I mean, it's just a shot, right? So does that technically is there regulation? Do you know? Is there regulation on how long they have to test it for, what they're looking for, or how that goes?
Yeah, man, and that's what really scares me because I think that like people that have been really in tune to the news and batting out all the bullshit have seen that some of these vaccines that were released during COVID were not properly tested.
Yep.
Regardless of what seat in the aisle you're taking. I mean, if you really look into it, you'll find legitimate resources that prove that they were not properly tested prior to being mass produced for
Well,
citizens of the world. And that really scares me, dude, to be
yeah.
honest with you, especially with this new, Ozempic drug, right?
Yep.
All these people are taking it. How long has it been tested? Do we know the long-term effects, even medium-term effects? I consider that like
Exactly.
10 years. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
we have no idea. That's mortifying.
Well, like you said, regardless of what seat you take on the aisle, like I think everybody should probably agree that pushing out a vaccine in 6 months or less is probably kind of scary.
Yeah.
You know, um, I'm pretty watchful of what I put in my body, um, and I try to understand what it is that goes into my body. But I think the vast majority of the public doesn't even know what a vaccine is. I don't even know if I could
Right.
tell you what a vaccine is.
Right. So basically, what the mRNA vaccines are, they're a spike protein vaccine that binds to the spike protein receptors. I forget what they're called. And basically, they're injecting little bits of virus into you, typically, is what a
Yes,
vaccine is. And then your body creates antibodies against that um, type of virus, and then it'll be more resistant to it in the future. And we've had a lot of
gotcha.
success with these types of drugs and, cures for diseases because they work. I'm not
Yes,
saying
yeah,
anything against that. Like, I believe in healthcare and
yes,
science, and that's the reason why the US has the best healthcare, because it's privatized, it's competitive. Don't get me started on, how pharmaceutical companies are fucking it up, but we do have phenomenal healthcare because of that reason.
absolutely, yes.
Right? So I'm not talking against that by any means. I believe in it, but there's some suspect shit that's been going on.
Oh yeah, especially when you get closer to the actual company itself.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, that's where I mean Pfizer made what? I mean, what was their intake from the vaccine? It had to have been a lot of money. We'll just say that, a lot of money.
Let's see. Pfizer profits from COVID vaccine. CNBC, as of February 2nd, 2023, said the ongoing COVID pandemic propelled pharmaceutical company Pfizer's earnings to a record $100 billion last year, almost 57 billion of which was driven by the vaccine and Paxlovid.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, that just tells you all that you need to know.
Dude, and that's
Everything,
2022.
everything that
We're
happens,
selling it in
somebody's
2021
making
as
money.
well. Yes,
Yep,
100%.
everybody's gonna be making money.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
the easiest things that you can do as a person is try to trace back to see who's making money, because you may not be happy with what you find.
yep, yep. And it's a group of them, They know what they're doing. They
Yep.
know what they're doing. They're collectively banded together. Why do you think we have lobbyists
Oh,
from ultra
exactly.
mega national pharmaceutical companies that work their way up? Oh, wait, now they're sitting on the board of the FDA.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
they have big ties to big pharma. They approve all the good drugs while stopping my buddy like Mackenzie, episode
Yep.
12. Please take a listen to that if you guys haven't either. I know I'm throwing a lot of self promo out here in this episode, but he talks about a lot of drugs he's been trying to get approved. He's a commercial bee farmer in Canada. So not only does he have to jump through hoops because of, he's not of the same nationality, the FDA basically is scrutinizing, what is it, Eastern medication types of things. And he was saying that since it's non pharmaceutical, it goes through the same process where it didn't have to 5 years ago or something like that.
Really?
So he said he's
Yeah.
getting shoved in with all of these other, huge drugs and
Yeah.
pharma companies that are trying to compete for space in the markets. And that's where they really throttle and bottleneck what's really coming to market and stock, is being stocked on the shelves. And people like him that are trying to produce natural alternatives and, like, legitimate things from nature that we used hundreds of years ago to help us with these ailments and diseases. He can't get through, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to get him to
Exactly.
send me
Yeah.
some of that shit low key, bro, to us.
Well, nobody's going to be able to buy it because the advertising is all going to be in the favor of the guys making money. The legalization is going to all be in the favor of the guys making money. Um, if
Yep.
nobody's making money on it, then America doesn't want it.
Yeah, dude, that's my whole theory with marijuana. I think they're just waiting for big tobacco to come in and dominate the market, and then they'll pass it.
Well, what's funny to me is I think a lot of people, to kind of get back to like the finance stuff,
Yeah.
so many people think that whenever weed gets legalized, which I think it is a when, not an if, I think it's a
Yep.
when it does get, federally legalized, everybody thinks that all these weed companies are gonna, you know, do great, right? People are buying like weed stocks or
Yep.
ETFs with a bunch of weed focused, stocks, and I think they think that they're going to do well, but you have to remember that the government is not going to open up a new industry unless they've decided the leader,
Yep.
right? And so what's going to happen is your little dispensary from, Colorado that is, trying to grow and expand and, maybe he's even a public company, whatever. The second that weed gets federally legalized, they're not going to have the infrastructure to be able to dominate the industry.
No
So what's
way.
actually going to happen is that 99% of these companies are going to die, and Philip Morris or whatever is going to come in and be
Yep.
the hand chosen pick by the government.
Yep. Philip Morris definitely coming in. Philip Morris Altria now. I think they're a conglomerate. I'm not
Yeah,
quite
you're right.
sure.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, yep, they're going to come in and dominate the market. You're 100% correct. At least in my opinion, maybe 20 years from now, we'll find ourselves being wrong. Hopefully, I think that would be, the better alternative. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think when they pass, the language could be used against small business owners. And we've seen
Exactly.
that in the past,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
They changed the rules just a tad. So now all of these small guys with 2 or 3 locations are non compliant to the federal government. Uh-oh.
Exactly.
Now you got to spend 150 G's to make your warehouse compliant. By that
Yep.
time, 8 months have passed, for a full
Exactly.
renovation. Boom, all of these other companies have already swooped in,
They have
built
full
their
market share,
infrastructure.
and yep,
Exactly.
all you have to do, they already have the advertising's done. Yeah, I guarantee you, those companies already have the advertisings already finished. I bet they're already done, ready to
Yeah, if
go.
not, they're working on it. If not,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
definitely working on it. Yeah, they got
Yep,
something, man.
I guarantee you. I mean, these companies work 5, 10 years in the future. I guarantee you, Altria, Philip Morris, or whatever, already has their their strategy to take market share already all planned out.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm over that shit, man. Like, uh it's just so frustrating because like one of my aspirations is to own a business and build a business, and it's
Yeah.
just so intimidating to get in any market space because the big guys have huge amounts of overhead. They can undercut you in every which way. The only thing that would hold you up over one of these other big guys is, your relationship with the customer or the client.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
having those skills is huge. But at the end of the day, I feel like at least 40 to 50% of people are going to go with the cheaper option because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Or you gotta, really, really go somewhere that you believe no one else is yet,
Hmm.
right? And that's how these major companies get formed. But, you know, a lot of times those big companies will come in and, and buy you out, um, which, I guess is a good thing for the small business owner. But you're right. I mean, in 99% of industries, it's quite literally impossible. I've been thinking that I want to, go into to manufacturing planes. What do you think about
Dude,
that?
that would be cool, man. That would be gas. I mean, Boeing
Can you
would just
imagine?
fucking themselves.
Yeah, can you imagine what Boeing would do if, somebody tried to create a safer plane?
Yeah, I mean, they dominate the market share. It's just like
Yeah,
these
it's just a
these
duopoly. It's just Boeing
yeah,
and Airbus, and
yep.
that's it.
Yep, it's these massive companies in the what is it, the military technological market,
Hmm.
more specifically weapons and arms manufacturers, because Rolls-Royce definitely makes engines for Boeing's fucking airplanes, and
Yes.
they make engines for the big cruise ships that Disney's using to go on their cruises, right? Not only military armament type things, but they're also creating everyday commercial products as well, and like they have such a strong hold of these markets. It's ridiculous. I mean, what is it? Northrop Grumman,
Yes.
Rolls Royce. What are some other ones? I mean, they're just
It's
so
a
huge.
big French company. It's a huge French company. I'm trying to think of what it's called. Um, Probably won't be able to remember, but you're exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. They have Airbus, Nexter, MBDA.
No, I actually think it's. I was thinking Airbus for the plane, but I believe a Saudi company makes their engines. I'm not totally. Sure about
Yeah, I
that.
mean, either way, they have pretty much direct control of that entire
Yeah.
market, especially
Yep.
with governmental contracts. I don't know if you're
Yes.
aware of the intricacies of all of that. You're into the devil's chessboard now, so like that is just starting to come into play. I mean, the way that guy explains it is phenomenal. But for
Oh well,
those of you
don't
out
worry. I've seen War
there,
Dogs.
oh yeah, there you go. Was that oh my god, I can't remember what it was. Graham was explaining that all to me because that was like they're making a parody of it, but that was a huge event um in the what was it like 70s, and that was a big deal because that
Like the real story behind it.
yes. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a
Yep. You're
massive deal.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Oh my god, I can't remember what it was called. Oh well, if we had Graham here, he'd be able to tell me.
Yeah.
Shit. But anyway, like that's a huge deal. I think it brought to light, what the US was doing in terms of military industrial complex and how we were continuing to bolster our market and make a ton of money, you know. How do you make a lot of money through war? Maybe you blow shit up and then their entire infrastructure system built back up. You're pumping money into the
Yep.
economy. You're
Yep.
producing more weapons because you don't want to get attacked again, right? It
Yep.
just creates like a very bolsterous, like um, fast growing economic cycle. And we've been
Yep.
caught up in that cycle for what, 40 years now,
For 40
50
years,
years.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
it's a scary
yeah.
cycle, and it's gonna
Yeah.
keep continuing. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Did you see there were Russian subs off the coast of Miami or off the coast of Cuba, which is like 20 miles from Miami with nuclear weapons? I mean, that's fucking
Yep.
terrifying.
Yep. Oh, those subs are scary, dude. There are subs in the world. I have a good buddy in the military, um, and he wasn't on the submarine before, but he had told me before. He was like, dude, you would not believe what submarines can do or where they are. I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. You would,
He
you
was like,
would
if
never
there was a
find.
map of the world with little pins of each country and where their submarines currently are right this moment, you would be shocked. And I was
Yeah,
like,
dude.
that is not what I want to hear right now.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast on my drive home from the beach this past week, and this woman, I'm gonna have to find her book because it seems super interesting. She wrote about nuclear winter and how that is closer than ever before, even with the 80 years in between basically the Cold War. And now we've been experiencing the Cold War. Those Russian warships and subs, showing themselves off the coast are directly impactful of our involvement in Ukraine. Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons. He has stated
Yep.
that he will do so, and that is probably one of the first times, outside of general terrorism, that a major world leader has threatened legitimately nuclear armament against another world leading country.
Yep. Yep.
And she said in that podcast, what was it? She said one of the naval submarinists was telling her, he gave her an analogy. I think it was like a basketball in space. You have a better chance of finding a basketball in space than you do a nuclear submarine in the ocean.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. And the crazy part about it is that the Russian and the American submarines actually have a decent amount of contact. They actually run into each other quite a bit. But typically what happens is that they're both in places that they shouldn't be, so
Yeah,
they both just kind of forget it. You know,
yeah,
there's actually been declassified documents from the 90s, um, that my buddy was telling me about not too long ago. But they're declassified 90s that basically detail one time where a Russian and an American submarine um, were both in the waters of Africa, right? Kind of staging a coup or whatever you call it. Um, and they both
yeah.
accidentally kind of ran into each other on their radars, and they were. I think both governments were kind of like, all right, we'll just forget about this.
Yeah, man. There's so much shit, and that's the problem. Like everybody comes into like the news and the media with a recency bias, and that's why
Yep.
they instituted the Freedom of Information Act, because nobody cares about something that happened
Yes.
50 years ago unless,
Exactly.
the whole JFK thing is sus, very sus. and they're not going to release that type of shit. But for like things like this, that actually have huge national impact and like theoretical impact, just in the way of like how we form thoughts and opinions and realize, how different events led up to where we are now. And people just don't seem to care because it happened 50 years ago. And like,
Exactly.
what can we do with history other than learn from our mistakes? We're
Well, the
humans.
JFK stuff, wasn't that supposed to release in like 2013 or something? Wasn't there a date
Hmm.
on that? Or was it
Yes.
2009? Was it 50 years after? Because it was 69, right?
Yeah.
So that would
You're
be
right.
40 years, 2009. I don't remember when it was.
Yeah. I want to
But it was
say
supposed to release
the
on a date, and then every president since then has basically just said no.
Well, basically what happened, and somebody that has a history degree or knows this better than I can, I'm just going to summarize it. A TLDR for those of you who use Reddit. Basically, what happened was the Warren Commission was assembled under Lyndon B. Johnson after the
Yes.
assassination of President Kennedy, and the Warren Commission had a lot of very corrupt people involved
Like
in.
like the leader.
Yes, like the leader. We'll let everybody out there read the Devil's Chessboard before we get too much into that, because I know Dulles had a huge impact on that whole thing. Um, but basically, what happened was the Warren Commission decided that by I think it was 2012 that they'd come to a final conclusion and start releasing the remainder of the documents. And there was some figure that I looked up rather recently, probably about a month ago now, because that's when I was first talking about it with Graham, and they have released like 1.4 million documents in the past 10 years. Are any of those incredibly important? Are a lot of them redacted? No and yes. You know what I mean? So they're
Yeah.
they're they're cherry picking what information to really
Oh,
release to the
exactly.
public.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool that they are doing something at least, because I never, the whole time I never suspected them to release the legitimate stuff. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and eventually, probably in our lifetime, I would think, I would think that we'll know. I mean, do
I
you
would
agree
hope
with
so.
that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so
I
too.
mean, eventually we're gonna get over it, and eventually people. The only problem though is that say the CIA was in on it, which I think the majority of people kind of agree with now.
Hmm.
The only reason why they wouldn't tell us that the CIA was in on it 50 years ago is if the CIA is still in on it, right? That's the only reason why they wouldn't release the documents. Um, and so that's probably why they're not releasing the documents, is because the CIA is still up to shady stuff, and they don't want us to start questioning it even more. But hopefully, at some point in our lifetimes, they'll confess.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on the right track. Now, do I think they're actively involved in the same plot that they were when they assassinated Kennedy? No. Do I think they're up to very, very similar types of things?
Yes,
Yes. You know what I
absolutely.
mean? So that's what
Yeah,
they don't want to give away their trade secret, I guess you could
exactly.
say.
Yeah, yeah. They don't want to
Mm,
actually admit that they're doing stuff. They just want us to keep, questioning it and have us be labeled as conspiracy theorists or whatever.
exactly. Exactly. Oh my God. It's crazy. All right. Well, let's transition to the last topic that you kind of wanted to talk about before we get off here. We probably have about another 15 minutes remaining. I'd like to do something long form with you and Graham. Something that we've
Okay.
been looking into is some history type stuff, hashing out some important events. And I think that could be a lot of fun with you if we could find a time to get
Yeah.
everybody coordinated. But, anyways, you brought up a book that I've actually been interested in for a while. I've seen it on reading lists on Instagram, Reddit, not the newspaper. I don't read the newspaper. I'm Gen Z. So,
Yeah.
bad joke.
So the book that you're referencing is called Walkable City. It's by Jeff Speck. He's an urbanist, and what really got me kind of interested in this topic is pretty cool. One of my favorite TikTok videos I've ever seen. It was about a 4-minute video. I believe the guy's page is he calls himself the Happy Urbanist. I'll have to send this video to you. It's like 5 minutes long, but it's pretty simple. He lives in Chattanooga, I believe, Chattanooga, Tennessee,
Uh-huh.
and the beginning of the video he pulls up a map and it shows like his walking route on Apple Maps, and it says that a public park is 18 minutes away, an 18-minute walk, right? So that's, not a bad walk at all. That's probably, an average walk is about 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And so he basically starts the video by saying, this should be an easy walk. And he basically goes through the entire walk. And as an urbanist, he explains why it is actually not walkable because of the infrastructure. And there's all different types of reasons, right? There's the sidewalk lengths. There's the stuff that they've added to the roads to protect pedestrian or not pedestrians to protect the drivers that actually make it more dangerous for the pedestrians.
Hmm.
And he basically just talks a little bit about how our current cities are not walkable. And I thought this was so interesting because everybody always, knows somebody. I've never been to Europe before. I'm not sure if you have, but everybody knows somebody who's been on, a study abroad or a Europe
Yep.
trip, and they come back and all they can talk about is just, oh, dude, the city is so nice. You just walk everywhere. There's public transportation.
Hmm.
Everybody's walking. Everybody's happy. Everybody's skinny, right? And there's all these different reasons why we don't have that. And part of it that I'd never really understood before is kind of the way that our cities are set up.
Yep.
So, anyways, I would really recommend to check out Walkable City. He kind of talks a little bit about what happened to our cities. Um, Basically, what happened was obviously we had the national highway deal. Was that Eisenhower that did that?
I think
Um,
it was Ike. I think you're right.
yeah. But anyway, so we set up the interstates throughout the country, and what happened was in the 80s, all the big city mayors were basically fighting with each other to try to get more, tourists and more people living in their cities, right? So think Chicago, like the medium to high population cities, right? Like Louisville, Kentucky is top 40 in population, right?
Sure.
Cities like that, right? So basically, what they did was they were fighting with each other, and they were like, "Wow, these interstates connecting, the country is so cool. What if we had highways surrounding the cities?" And so
Mm.
they built basically a circle of these, 65 mile per hour roads surrounding the cities. And what that did was in the 80s, that just wrecked the cities, right? Everybody then thought it was so cool to move to the suburbs, right? And so that's what started the whole suburban crawl that you see of majority white people, right? They went to the suburbs,
Mm. Sure.
and a majority African American population stayed behind, right? And so that was kind of a form of kind of segregation, honestly, with the way that
Sure.
they set it up. But anyways, the book is really interesting. He talks about kind of what makes a good walk, right? The number one thing is safety, right? Which
Yeah.
our cities are not safety oriented. There's so
Not
many
at all.
examples that you can see if you just step outside and look, with sidewalks not being on the road. There's all these different types of, if, have you ever seen like a light post in the middle of a sidewalk, to where walkers have to split the
Yeah.
post.
Hmm.
That is set up to protect the driver because if they go off the road, they're gonna hit the pole before they hit a store,
Right.
right? But that makes it dangerous for the pedestrian. He also talks about an interesting walk, right? There's not a lot of interesting walks in big cities. I mean, what are you gonna
Hmm.
look at? Just more road and more cars and more parking lots.
Yep.
A comfortable walk, right? So he talks a lot about shade, trees, things like that. To actually make it comfortable, like water stations. We have no
Hmm.
outdoor water fountains
Nope.
that I've ever seen before, and also a purposeful walk, right? So there's actually a really cool thing. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but it's called the Walk Score. I
Hmm.
believe it's just like walkscore.com.
Yeah, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
Walkscore.
I've seen him on Zillow for like rent.
Yes, Zillow. So
Housing
Zillow
partner
partnered with them.
rentals and stuff.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So it kind of talks about the purposeful walk, right? Like where are you actually going to be walking to, right? Can you walk to a grocery store? Can you walk to church? Can you walk your kids to school, right? Like where can you actually walk? And for a majority of Americans, if they ask themselves that, they're going to say nowhere, right? So the only incentive that we have to walk is for exercise, and not a lot of people do that. So,
Huh.
anyways,
That's
I would I
yeah.
would really yeah, I would really encourage you to check out the book.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting concept. I never thought about it like that before. Is there's no purpose other than exercise. I mean, I walk
Exactly.
some places around here because, I live in the city and there are things to do within a walking distance, within a 20-minute radius. Something I did kind of want to bring up. after your very eloquent spiel there about this book that I am putting on my list to read, and everybody out there should do as well, is I wanted to speak upon the efficacy of like sidewalks and pedestrian walkways and stuff like that in cities because of my current role, my current job. I see how the city deals with, you know, issues of their constituents, right? And it's not very well. The city is extremely understaffed, underpaid. The only thing they get good at the end of their work day is the knowledge that they'll have a pension check in 25 years. I mean, like they're not recruiting talented workforce, and then we expect like all of these tax dollars to be effectively put into place and applied
Yep.
to areas that we need. Like no, like there's people lobbying for all of this money for stupid shit, like to prop up Philip Morris or Altria, in Richmond because
Yep.
they're headquartered here. We want the economy to stay. We want the money to continue, being spent here. So we dump loads of money into dumb shit like that rather
Yep.
than repairing the roads, increasing bike paths and
Yes.
safe places to bicycle, um, you know, sidewalk repair, all that fun stuff. So I kind of just wanted to like bring that to light because um yeah, and it seems like Eisenhower kind of fucked us with the Federal Aid Highway Act, right? In
Yep.
1956. I looked it up. That was the date, June 26th, actually. So a little bit less than a month ago. But like for our current infrastructure, we have no options. That's the problem because they're all understaffed, underpaid, don't really, I don't want to say they don't know what they're doing because they do, but like it's just like we need more skilled people in that industry because we're getting nowhere. I mean, how can you ever improve upon anything without a solid infrastructure and a well thought out business plan in place? And I feel like
Yep.
our city governments, and state governments are just in shambles. Nobody knows what the
Well,
fuck
there
to
is
do.
no plan. It
Right.
used to be in the cities, it used to be to where you would have to, if you wanted to drive into the city, you would have had to either park on the outskirts and then take a taxi in, or
Yep.
park on the outskirts and take a bus in, have them drop you off and walk wherever you want. Now, there's probably very few spots in the entire United States of America that you cannot drive to the front door. And so you're right. When it comes to fixing that, right, it's going to take multiple things. Number one, it's going to take an educated person to actually bring it to their attention,
Hmm.
right, which isn't going to be very prevalent throughout the country. And it's also going to need the money, right, which also isn't very
Yeah,
prevalent
we're
throughout the
sending
country.
we're sending tens of billions of dollars to foreign aid for
Yep.
wars that
Yep.
are just perpetual.
Yep.
So
And now I will say the one thing that the book does kind of, I would say, do a good job at is that it really puts the focus more towards the local government, um,
I like that.
with things that are actually easy to do, right? Like little
Sure.
things, right? Like there's a road that the TikToker I was telling you about that he was walking on, and it was a four-way lane, right? All going one direction. And he actually showed a pretty cool picture. It was the exact same spot present day versus 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, the road was two lanes in each direction, and you can actually see the speed limit sign in the picture, and the speed limit was like 35, right? Because it's two lanes in each direction, so you have to go slower. And they changed it to go four ways because not enough people were going the other way, right? They thought it was more efficient, right, to change that road to all four ways in the same direction.
Hmm.
And of course, the speed limit goes up to 55, right? Well, who's going to be walking on the side of the road when the speed limit's 55, right? We have
Yep.
all the data in the world to back that up, that when the speed limit's slower, more people are walking, right? And it's pretty cool. In the picture, you can see there's much more people out on their feet. And he was out there in the middle of the day, on a Friday, and there wasn't a person in sight. And so,
Yep.
but the one thing I'll say though is that it's not necessarily so much about, okay, what are we going to do federally, like what are we going to do even statewide, but the it really goes back to the local governments, right? Like there are
Yep.
little things that they can do. They can add more bike paths, right? They can increase the length of the sidewalk. They can make
Yep.
sure that a majority of their constituents can easily walk to a park, right? They
Hmm.
can take down the fences on the park, right? There's no reason we need fences on a park. Because what if you're walking from one direction? What are you supposed to do? Walk all the way around to even enter the front gate of the park, right?
Right.
Like just little things like that that actually can increase the the interesting part of the walk, right? And then there's also, a whole bunch of things about like food deserts and things like that that really get into the purposeful walk. Um,
Sure.
but a lot of it is really local.
Yeah, man. And before we kind of wrap it up here, I just want to make a PSA to everybody out there listening. The local government is the most important election that you can vote for
Yes.
by far. They directly impact your life every single day. They are the ones,
Yep.
like Dylan was saying, managing your roads, maintaining your sidewalks, making sure all the businesses have the correct permits to occupy the spaces they're in, make sure they're regulated, in this and that way. Like it is so
Yep.
goddamn important to do your research on your local government. Unfortunately, like I'm like so bad at this myself, and I don't necessarily practice what I preach, but I have moved every single year the past 7 years, and it makes it a little bit difficult to like dive into my local economy, my local electoral government, and stuff like that. So, for those of you out there calling me a hypocrite, maybe, but it's factual. It's the right way to go, especially for those of you that have been living in the same place for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It's so important, and I'm sure those people have seen how much of an impact specific people can make on their local area. It's wild, man. It's wild.
Well, it's not as flashy as the presidential election, so
That's right.
a little bit harder to keep up with. But you're right, though. Absolutely, the local government is what, like you said, what helps your sidewalks, what gets your teachers paid correctly. Especially as
Yeah.
school governments are huge too, right?
Yeah.
Even if you don't have kids or you're not in the school yourself, right? You obviously want your area to be properly educated.
Yeah.
You want your kids in your community to be safe and feel safe and to be smart. Um, Absolutely, dude. And that's I'm honestly glad you said that because I've been trying to get a little bit more educated myself.
Yeah, man. And that's all we can wish for at the end of the day. Just being, what is it, self reliant on the fact that you want to learn more about that topic because it really matters. Like at the end of the day, that's all we can ask for anybody listening to this podcast or out in our everyday lives to practice. Just have an open mind. Look to learn new information. um accept new opinions. I know it's really hard. I struggle with it too, man. But like, you never think about it from somebody else's perspective unless A, somehow you're wearing fucking Apple Pro Vision goggles and you can somebody else's life, or B, somebody, has a meaningful conversation to you about it, right? Like, the fact that they're willing to put themselves, out there in a vulnerable position to talk about something they're passionate about usually is telling of a pretty important topic. So, that's something that we've moved way too far away from, in my opinion, is be able to converse on, um,
Yep.
edgy subjects, for lack of a better term. But yeah, man.
Yep. Conversations are the most important part, man.
That's right. That's right. That's 100% why I started this podcast. For those of you that have listened to the previous 20 episodes, this is probably the 13th time that I've mentioned it. But then again, man, it's important to me, it's important to reconnect with somebody like you that I, spent so much time, in my, I don't want to say adolescent years, but like in middle school, high
Yeah.
school, playing video games together. It's a meaningful relationship, right? Like you're somebody that I value as a person. You're a super smart dude. I know you're going to be successful to whichever degree you apply yourself in. So you're somebody that I want to stay connected to, and like that goes for all of the people that I have on this podcast. I just value your opinion. I want to hear what these people have to say. It's important to have those conversations with your friends and family. To be honest with you.
Absolutely, man. And it's a blast being on here, and we can both learn something from each other, and I think that's the way to go. So
Yes, sir. Well, thanks again for coming on. I always appreciate you taking your time out of your day to do something as dull as this for the 10 people that listen to it every week. But for those of you out there, make sure we give Dylan some love on this episode. It's been a good one. It'll be the second one that releases for him. We'll definitely have him on in the future. Like I said earlier, I want to do him with Graham because I think that could be a stellar conversation. But for those of you
that'd be
out
fun.
there, thanks for, yeah. For those of you out there, thanks for sticking with us for so long. And we'll see you on the next one. Find our podcast in your traditional social media apps and anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you on the next one.